Some secrets don't destroy a family the moment they're spoken. They destroy it the moment someone decides to believe them. That was the thought that kept echoing in my mind long after Sunday dinner ended. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 69 years old, a widow, a mother, and until that evening, I believed I understood the people sitting around my dining room table. The dinner had started like dozens of others before it. The roast was in the oven by 3 in the afternoon. The mashed potatoes were made from scratch. A fresh apple pie cooled on the kitchen counter. Family dinners mattered to me. They always had. After my husband Richard passed away 2 years earlier, I worked even harder to keep those traditions alive. I told myself that as long as we still gathered around the same table, we were still a family. My son Ethan arrived just before 6. His wife Olivia walked in behind him carrying a bottle of sparkling cider and wearing the same bright smile she always seemed to wear around other people. She hugged me, complimented the smell of dinner, and helped set the table. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed wrong. We sat together. We talked about work, the weather, rising grocery prices, and the neighbor who had just bought a new truck. It was ordinary, comfortably ordinary. Looking back, I think that was what made the next moment so unsettling. Halfway through dinner, Olivia pushed her chair back and excused herself. I barely noticed. I was telling Ethan about a rose bush blooming in the backyard when I felt someone standing beside me. I looked up. Olivia was there. She leaned down slightly, close enough that no one else could hear her. Her perfume carried a faint scent of vanilla. Her smile never disappeared. Then she whispered something into my ear. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood her. The words were so unexpected, so completely out of place, that my mind refused to process them. I stared at my plate. My fork remained suspended in my hand. Across the table, Ethan kept talking about a project at work. He had no idea what had just been said. Olivia straightened and calmly returned to her seat. Then she picked up her glass and smiled as though nothing had happened. I didn't react. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. Years of life experience had taught me that people reveal more when they think you're not paying attention. So I smiled. I took another bite of dinner. I nodded when appropriate. To anyone watching, I looked perfectly normal. Inside, however, something had shifted. For the remainder of the evening, I found myself studying Olivia when she wasn't looking. The confidence in her posture. The certainty in her eyes. It wasn't the expression of someone making a joke. It wasn't the expression of someone confused. It was the expression of someone delivering a message. A deliberate one. When dinner finally ended, Ethan loaded leftovers into containers while Olivia gathered her purse. She hugged me goodbye. Her voice was sweet. Her smile was warm. Yet as she stepped through the front door, she glanced back at me for only a moment. That brief look unsettled me more than the whisper itself. It felt less like a confession and more like a challenge. I locked the door after they left and stood alone in the quiet house. The dishes could wait. The leftovers could wait. Even the pie could wait. Because for the first time in years, I had the feeling that someone had carefully placed a single missing puzzle piece directly in front of me. And if I chose to pick it up, I might finally see a picture that had been hidden from me all along. I did not sleep much that night. The house was quiet in the way only an empty house can be. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The old clock in the hallway marked each passing hour with a soft click. Normally those sounds comforted me. They reminded me that life moved forward, even after loss. That night, they only made the silence feel heavier. I sat in my bedroom long after midnight, looking at a framed photograph on my dresser. It had been taken 10 years earlier during a family vacation in Maine. Richard stood beside me with his arm around my shoulders. Ethan was smiling at the camera. Olivia had just joined the family then. She looked young, nervous, eager to belong. I remembered how happy Ethan had been when he introduced her to us. I remembered welcoming her into our family without hesitation. Looking at that photograph now, I found myself studying every face as though the answers had been there all along. By morning, I had convinced myself that perhaps I was overthinking everything. Grief changes people. Loss changes people. Maybe Olivia had said something strange that sounded more important than it actually was. Maybe I was letting my imagination wander into places it did not belong. I poured myself a cup of coffee and tried to focus on ordinary things. I watered the flowers on the porch. I folded laundry. I sorted through a stack of mail that had accumulated on the kitchen counter. Then, just after noon, something happened that disturbed me far more than the whisper itself. I found an old storage box while cleaning a hall closet. It was filled with paperwork I had not looked at in years. Most of it was unremarkable. Utility bills, insurance forms, tax documents. Then I noticed a small envelope tucked between two folders. My name was not on it. Richard's was. The envelope had never been opened. I hesitated before sliding the letter out. It turned out to be a receipt from a hotel nearly 2 hours away from our town. The date caught my attention immediately. It was from 8 months before Richard passed away. I frowned. Richard had told me he was attending a business conference that weekend. At the time, I had thought nothing of it. Yet something about the receipt felt wrong. Richard had been retired for nearly a year when that date appeared. There had been no business conference. At least none that I remembered. I placed the paper on the table and stared at it for a long moment. One odd receipt meant nothing. People forget things. Records end up in strange places. Still, I could not shake the feeling growing inside me. Later that afternoon, my friend Diane called. We had known each other for more than 30 years. She immediately noticed something different in my voice. I almost told her everything. Instead, I simply said that family matters had been weighing on my mind. Diane listened quietly before giving me advice that stayed with me long after the conversation ended. When something does not make sense, she said, do not rush to explain it away. Pay attention. After we hung up, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The receipt remained where I had left it. Sunlight stretched across the hardwood floor as the afternoon slowly faded toward evening. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a possibility I had been avoiding. What if the whisper was not meant to shock me? What if it was meant to point me toward something? I looked again at the receipt, then at the family photograph still sitting nearby. The pieces did not fit together yet, not even close. But I had lived long enough to know that truth rarely arrives all at once. Sometimes it arrives one small piece at a time. And for reasons I could not yet explain, I had the feeling that someone had just handed me the second piece. I spent the next 2 days trying to convince myself that I was chasing shadows. At 69, I had learned that not every strange coincidence carried hidden meaning. Sometimes a receipt was just a receipt. Sometimes people said confusing things without intending to start a storm. Yet every time I tried to move on, something pulled me back. On Wednesday afternoon, I drove to the local garden center to buy fertilizer for my roses. It was a routine trip, the kind that normally cleared my head. The weather was pleasant. The sky was bright blue. For a little while, I almost forgot about the whisper, the receipt, and the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. Then I saw someone I recognized. Her name was Karen Whitmore. She and Richard had once served together on a charity committee. We had not spoken in nearly a year. She greeted me warmly and asked how I had been doing. We exchanged the usual pleasantries before she suddenly hesitated. It was the kind of hesitation people make when they are deciding whether to say something uncomfortable. Margaret, she said carefully, I hope you do not mind me asking this, but how is Olivia doing these days? The question caught me off guard. She seems fine, I replied. Why do you ask? Karen looked away for a moment. Perhaps it is nothing, she said. I just remember seeing her with Richard several times before he passed away. They always seemed to be discussing something important. A cold sensation moved through me. I kept my expression neutral. What do you mean? Karen frowned slightly. Maybe I am remembering incorrectly. It was a while ago. I saw them at a coffee shop a few times. Once at a bookstore downtown. I assumed they were planning some kind of surprise for you. She smiled apologetically. I probably should not have mentioned it. I told her not to worry and changed the subject. But her words followed me all the way home. Richard had never mentioned meeting Olivia privately. Not once. If they had been planning a surprise, there had never been any surprise. That evening I found myself standing in front of the bookshelf in Richard's old study. Since his passing, I had barely touched the room. Everything remained exactly where he left it. His favorite chair sat beside the window. His reading glasses still rested on the desk. Dust had settled on many surfaces, but the room still felt strangely alive, as though a part of him lingered there. I began looking through old notebooks and folders. I was not searching for anything specific. I simply felt compelled to look. Nearly an hour passed before I found something unusual. Tucked inside a financial planner was a folded sheet of paper. It contained a list of dates and appointment times. Most meant nothing to me. Then one name appeared repeatedly. Olivia. Not once. Not twice. More than a dozen times across several months. No explanation. No notes. Just her name beside scheduled meetings. I sat down heavily in Richard's chair and stared at the page. The room suddenly felt smaller. Memories began resurfacing. Olivia stopping by unexpectedly when Ethan was out of town. Richard taking phone calls and stepping outside to finish them. Small moments that had seemed harmless at the time. Ordinary moments. Yet now they looked different. I did not want to jump to conclusions. I did not want to believe the worst about anyone. But the list in my hands was real. The receipt was real. Karen's comments were real. For the first time, I stopped asking whether something had been hidden from me. Instead, I began asking how much had been hidden. As evening settled outside the windows, I carefully folded the paper and placed it beside the receipt. 2 pieces had become 3, and with every new piece, the picture grew harder to ignore. The following morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. Not peace, not comfort, just clarity. The kind that arrives when you finally stop fighting a question that has been sitting in the corner of your mind for too long. I made breakfast, watered the roses, and followed my usual routine, but everything felt different. Every familiar object in the house seemed connected to a memory I was now forced to examine from a new angle. Around noon, I drove downtown and parked near the bookstore Karen had mentioned. I told myself I was simply running errands. In truth, I wanted to see the place with my own eyes. The store had not changed much over the years. The same green awning. The same display window filled with bestsellers and seasonal decorations. I stood across the street for several minutes, remembering how Richard used to spend entire afternoons browsing shelves there. Then another memory surfaced, one I had not thought about in years. A rainy Thursday afternoon. Richard had told me he was helping Ethan with a home repair project. He had come home late carrying a bookstore bag. At the time, I laughed and teased him about his terrible cover stories. He laughed too. Now, standing there, I realized I never actually knew where he had spent that day. I returned home feeling unsettled. That evening, while sorting through an old cabinet in the study, I discovered something else. Hidden inside a folder containing investment statements was a greeting card. The envelope had been opened, but carefully preserved. There was no signature on the front. Inside, however, a short handwritten message appeared in neat cursive. The note thanked Richard for his guidance, patience, and support during a difficult period. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing shocking. Yet one detail immediately caught my attention. The handwriting belonged to Olivia. I recognized it from birthday cards and holiday notes she had sent over the years. I sat quietly and read the message 3 times. The wording itself was innocent. What troubled me was the date. The card had been written during the same period when Olivia's name repeatedly appeared on Richard's appointment list. Why had he kept it hidden among financial documents? Why preserve such an ordinary note so carefully? I placed the card beside the receipt and the appointment sheet. 3 clues had now become 4. Late that night, Ethan called. His voice sounded cheerful. He wanted to know whether I would attend a family gathering Olivia was organizing the following month. Apparently, she had been planning it for weeks. I listened carefully as he described decorations, guest lists, and preparations. Then he casually mentioned that Olivia seemed unusually emotional lately. The comment lingered in my mind long after the call ended. Emotional, distracted, secretive. Combined with everything else, the description felt significant. After hanging up, I walked through the dark house and stopped in front of a framed wedding photograph. Ethan and Olivia stood together smiling beneath a bright summer sky. Richard stood beside them, proud and happy. I studied the image for a long time. Sometimes the truth announces itself loudly. Other times it waits patiently in the background, allowing ordinary details to gather until they become impossible to ignore. Looking at that photograph, I realized I was no longer searching for answers out of curiosity. I was searching because too many pieces had started fitting together. And deep down, I feared that the picture forming in front of me would change everything I thought I knew about my family. 3 days later, the person I least expected knocked on my front door. Her name was Melissa Turner. She had worked as Richard's administrative assistant for nearly 7 years before retiring. I had always liked her. She was organized, professional, and fiercely loyal. When I opened the door, she smiled politely, but there was tension behind her eyes. "Margaret," she said, "I hope I am not interrupting." I invited her inside and made tea. For a few minutes we talked about ordinary things. Retirement, gardening, the weather. Then Melissa carefully placed a small envelope on the table between us. "I have been debating whether to bring this to you for months," she said quietly. My stomach tightened. What is it? Melissa looked down at her hands. After Richard passed away, I was sorting old office files. Most of them were routine documents. But there were a few things that seemed personal. I thought perhaps they belonged to you. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were several photocopied calendar pages. At first glance they looked ordinary. Then I noticed a pattern. Certain dates had been highlighted. Next to many of them appeared the initials OH, Olivia Hayes. I looked up. Melissa nodded slightly. I never asked questions, she said. That was not my place. But your husband met with Olivia many times during his final year. My pulse quickened. Did he ever explain why? Melissa hesitated. Only once. He told me they were working on something important for the family. He seemed determined to keep it private. The answer should have reassured me. Instead, it raised even more questions. If everything had been innocent, why so much secrecy? Melissa reached into her purse and removed one final document. There is something else. The paper was a reservation confirmation for a private conference room at a business center nearly 40 miles away. Richard's name appeared on the reservation. So did Olivia's. The meeting had lasted nearly 4 hours. I stared at the page in silence. Melissa leaned forward slightly. Margaret, I almost threw all of this away. But after hearing certain rumors recently, I felt you deserved to have it. What rumors? I asked. She looked uncomfortable. Nothing specific. Just whispers. People talking about unusual tensions inside the family. I do not know what is true. After she left, I remained at the kitchen table for a long time. The documents formed a neat stack beside the receipt, the greeting card, and the appointment list. Each item alone could be explained. Together, they painted a far more complicated picture. That evening, I received a text message from Olivia. She wanted to know whether I would be attending the family gathering next month. Her message was cheerful, friendly, almost overly friendly. I read it twice before, replying with a simple yes. Within seconds, she responded with a heart emoji and a message saying she was excited to see me. I set my phone down and stared out the window. The sun was setting beyond the trees, casting long shadows across the backyard. For the first time since this strange journey began, I felt certain about one thing. Olivia was not worried that I knew something. She was confident that I knew nothing. That confidence intrigued me. People are often most careless when they believe they are completely safe. I gathered the documents into a single folder and placed it inside my desk drawer. Then I locked the drawer and slipped the key into my pocket. Somewhere among these clues was the truth. I still did not know exactly what that truth looked like. But as I turned off the kitchen lights and prepared for bed, I realized something important. I was no longer waiting for answers to appear. I was actively moving toward them. And sooner or later, someone was going to make a mistake. The following week moved slowly. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Ethan went to work. Olivia continued posting cheerful family photos online. Friends and relatives talked excitedly about the upcoming gathering she was organizing. Yet beneath that calm surface, I felt as though I was standing on the edge of something much larger than I could see. On Tuesday morning, I decided to visit Richard's attorney. His name was Harold Bennett, and he had handled our family's legal affairs for more than 20 years. I scheduled the appointment under the pretense of updating a few estate documents. That part was true. At my age, keeping paperwork current was simply good practice. Harold greeted me warmly and invited me into his office. We spent several minutes discussing routine matters before I casually asked whether Richard had made any unusual requests during the final year of his life. Harold leaned back in his chair and thought for a moment. Nothing unusual, he said at first. Then his expression changed slightly. Although there was one thing. My heart immediately quickened. What was that? Harold opened a file cabinet and reviewed several folders before returning with a thin file. Richard asked me to prepare a sealed letter. He instructed that it remain unopened unless certain circumstances arose. I stared at him. What circumstances? Harold shook his head. He was intentionally vague. He simply said that if questions ever surfaced about decisions he made during his final year, the letter might become important. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Do you still have it? I asked. Harold nodded. Yes, but according to his instructions, it cannot be opened without meeting specific conditions. As disappointing as the answer was, it confirmed something I had begun to suspect. Richard knew that one day questions might be asked. Questions significant enough to justify leaving instructions behind. After leaving the office, I drove home in silence. The folder of documents remained locked inside my desk drawer, but now another piece existed somewhere beyond my reach. A sealed letter. A message from Richard waiting for the right moment. That evening, Olivia called unexpectedly. Her voice sounded bright and enthusiastic. She wanted to discuss seating arrangements for the family gathering. She spent nearly 20 minutes talking about decorations, catering, and guest lists. I listened politely, yet something about the conversation felt rehearsed, as though she wanted to make absolutely certain I planned to attend. Before ending the call, she asked a curious question. "You will be there, right, Margaret?" The question lingered in the air longer than it should have. "Of course," I replied. "I would not miss it." There was a brief pause. Then she laughed softly and changed the subject. After we hung up, I sat in my living room watching the evening news without really hearing it. The more I thought about the conversation, the more unusual it seemed. Olivia was not simply inviting me. She was making sure I appeared, as if my presence mattered for reasons she could not openly explain. Later that night, I opened the drawer and reviewed every document again. The receipt, the appointment list, the greeting card, the conference room reservation, the calendar pages Melissa had provided. Individually, they remained incomplete. Together, however, they pointed toward a truth still hiding just beyond reach. I carefully returned everything to the folder and locked the drawer once more. Then I looked at the calendar hanging in the kitchen. The family gathering was only 12 days away. For weeks I had been chasing clues. For weeks I had been assembling fragments of a story nobody wanted me to understand. Now, for the first time, I felt certain that whatever had been hidden would not stay hidden much longer. The days leading up to the gathering passed with a strange mixture of anticipation and restraint. I continued my normal routines. I met friends for coffee. I tended my garden. I attended church on Sunday. To anyone looking from the outside, my life appeared unchanged. Inside, however, I was paying attention to every detail. 5 days before the event, Ethan stopped by unexpectedly. He brought takeout from my favorite diner and spent nearly an hour sitting at my kitchen table. We talked about ordinary things at first. Then he mentioned Olivia. "She has been putting a lot of pressure on herself lately," he said. "She wants everything to be perfect." I nodded and listened. "Perfect for what?" I asked casually. Ethan smiled. "You know Olivia. She loves surprises." The word caught my attention immediately. Surprises. It was the same explanation people had quietly offered whenever questions arose about Richard and Olivia meeting privately. I did not respond. Instead, I changed the subject and allowed the conversation to move on. Yet after Ethan left, I found myself thinking about that single word for the rest of the afternoon. 2 days later, another unexpected development arrived. Harold Bennett called. His voice was calm but deliberate. "Margaret, I wanted to inform you that I reviewed some archived documents after our last conversation." I sat down immediately, and there was a brief pause. Richard added a note to his instructions regarding the sealed letter. If circumstances involving family disputes or questions about his intentions ever emerged, the letter could be opened with the agreement of his surviving spouse. My heart skipped. "Meaning me?" "Meaning you," Harold confirmed. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The realization settled heavily over me. Richard had anticipated something. Perhaps not the exact situation unfolding now, but enough uncertainty to leave a path toward answers. Harold asked whether I wished to proceed. I surprised myself by saying no. Not yet. After ending the call, I sat quietly by the living room window. The temptation to open the letter immediately was overwhelming. Yet something held me back. Every instinct told me that the upcoming gathering mattered. Olivia had worked too hard arranging it. She had been too eager to guarantee my attendance. The timing felt important. The night before the event, I barely slept. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Around midnight, I walked through the house and paused outside Richard's study. The door remained slightly open. For a long moment, I stood there looking into the dark room. I thought about our decades together, the ordinary mornings, the shared routines, the quiet confidence I once had in my understanding of the people closest to me. Then I thought about the folder hidden inside my desk, the clues, the questions, the sealed letter waiting for its moment. The next morning arrived bright and clear. The gathering was being held at a rented event space on the edge of town. White tablecloths covered the tables. Fresh flowers decorated every corner. Family members filled the room with laughter and conversation. Olivia greeted guests near the entrance, glowing with confidence. Ethan stood beside her smiling proudly. When Olivia saw me walk through the door, her expression brightened immediately. She crossed the room and embraced me warmly. "I am so happy you came," she said. I smiled politely. I would not have missed it. For just a second, her eyes searched my face as though looking for something. Fear, suspicion, anger. I gave her none of those things. Throughout the afternoon, I watched carefully. Conversations flowed around me. Relatives exchanged stories. Cameras flashed. Yet beneath the celebration, I sensed an undercurrent of expectation, as though several people were waiting for a particular moment to arrive. Then, shortly before the scheduled speeches began, I noticed something that made every instinct inside me come alive. Near the front of the room sat a large sealed envelope resting beside the podium, and written across the front in elegant handwriting were 3 simple words. For Margaret Hayes. For a moment, I simply stared at the envelope. Around me, conversations continued and glasses clinked softly, but my attention remained fixed on those 3 words. For Margaret Hayes. Olivia noticed where I was looking and smiled. "We have something special planned," she announced as she stepped toward the podium. Family members slowly took their seats. Ethan looked excited. Several relatives exchanged curious glances. I remained calm and folded my hands in my lap. Olivia began speaking about family, gratitude, and new beginnings. Her voice carried easily through the room. She thanked everyone for coming and spoke warmly about the future. Then she reached for the envelope. "Before we continue," she said, "there is something I want Margaret to have." The room grew quiet. Olivia handed me the envelope personally. Her smile was confident, almost triumphant. I accepted it politely and opened it. Inside was a letter and several printed photographs. The letter claimed that Richard had wanted me to receive a final surprise connected to the family's future. At first glance, it seemed touching, thoughtful even. But as I continued reading, a strange feeling settled over me. Certain phrases did not sound like Richard. The wording felt wrong, forced, carefully constructed. I lowered the letter and looked at Olivia. She watched me closely, too closely. Then I examined the photographs. They showed Richard and Olivia together at various locations during his final year. A coffee shop, a bookstore, a conference center lobby. Nothing inappropriate, nothing scandalous. Yet they were clearly meant to create an impression. Murmurs began spreading through the room as people leaned forward to see the pictures. Olivia stepped beside the podium and spoke again. "Richard cared deeply about our family," she said. "He trusted me with several important projects during his final months." Her words sounded rehearsed. As she continued speaking, something suddenly became clear. The envelope was not a gift. It was a narrative, a carefully prepared explanation for questions nobody had asked publicly yet. An explanation designed to control how the story would be understood. I reached into my purse and removed a small folder. The same folder that had been growing thicker for weeks. The room remained silent as I placed it on the table in front of me. Ethan frowned slightly. Olivia's smile faltered for the first time. "Margaret?" she asked. Her voice remained pleasant, but uncertainty had entered it. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were copies of the receipt, the appointment records, the reservation confirmations, the handwritten note, and the calendar pages Melissa had given me. I did not accuse anyone. I did not raise my voice. Instead, I simply placed the documents side by side, one by one, the way puzzle pieces are arranged before the picture becomes visible. Family members began studying them. Questions appeared on faces around the room. Confusion replaced celebration. Olivia remained perfectly still. Then I spoke for the first time. "For several weeks," I said quietly, "I have been trying to understand why so many things were hidden from me." Nobody interrupted. I do not know every answer yet, but I do know that truth does not fear questions. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument could have been. Olivia looked toward Ethan. Ethan looked toward the documents. And for the first time since that Sunday dinner weeks earlier, I saw uncertainty spread across both of their faces. Then my phone vibrated inside my purse. A new message had arrived. It was from Harold Bennett. Only 6 words appeared on the screen. "The letter can now be opened." The room remained silent as I looked at the message on my phone. 6 simple words. "The letter can now be opened." I slipped the phone back into my purse and slowly stood from my chair. No one spoke. No one seemed quite sure what was happening anymore. The celebration that had filled the room only an hour earlier had faded into uncertainty. I looked at Ethan first, then at Olivia. Neither of them looked confident now. Harold arrived less than 20 minutes later carrying a sealed envelope. Several family members recognized him immediately. He greeted everyone politely before walking directly toward me. Without a word, he placed the envelope in my hands. The paper felt heavier than it should have. For 2 years, it had waited. For 2 years, Richard's final explanation had remained hidden. I carefully opened the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The moment I saw Richard's familiar handwriting, my chest tightened. Harold nodded gently. "Take your time," he said. I began reading aloud. Richard's words were calm and direct. He explained that during the final year of his life, he had been working on a private family project. After receiving concerning medical news, he wanted to organize important financial records, family history documents, and future estate plans. Because Ethan's work required frequent travel, Richard had asked Olivia to assist him with meetings, appointments, and document preparation. The coffee shop meetings, the conference room reservations, the calendar entries, the private conversations. Every one of them had been connected to that project. Several relatives exchanged surprised looks. I continued reading. Then came the part that changed everything. Richard wrote that he feared misunderstandings could arise one day because so much of the work had been conducted quietly. He specifically stated that Olivia had helped him faithfully and that she had never acted against the family's interests. A long silence followed those words. Olivia lowered her eyes. Ethan stared at the floor. Richard's letter continued. He explained that the project had never been completed because his health declined faster than expected. The final pages contained instructions for distributing several family heirlooms, preserving family records, and funding college savings accounts for future generations. Then I reached the final paragraph. My voice nearly failed me as I read it. Richard wrote that families often break apart not because of secrets, but because people stop trusting one another. He hoped that when the letter was finally opened, it would remind everyone to seek truth before assuming the worst. When I finished reading, nobody spoke for several seconds. The room felt completely still. Then Olivia quietly stood up. Her eyes were filled with emotion. "I wanted to tell you everything weeks ago," she said softly. "But Richard asked me to keep my promise until the project was finished. After he passed away, I did not know how to explain any of it without sounding unbelievable." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I thought back to the whisper at dinner. The confusion, the clues, the questions. "Why did you say those things to me that night?" I finally asked. Olivia's expression softened. "Because I was afraid," she admitted. "I knew pieces of the story looked suspicious. I thought if I pushed you toward asking questions, you would eventually discover the truth for yourself instead of hearing rumors from someone else." The answer was imperfect, human, messy, but so was life. As family members slowly began talking again, the tension in the room eased. Not every question had a perfect answer. Not every misunderstanding disappeared instantly. Yet something important had changed. The uncertainty was gone. Later that evening, after the guests left and the tables were being cleared away, I stepped outside alone. The sun was setting beyond the parking lot. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For weeks, I had been searching for hidden meanings in every detail. I had followed clues, collected documents, and prepared myself for the worst. Instead, I found something far more valuable. I found the truth. And standing there beneath the fading evening sky, I realized that truth does not always arrive as a victory over someone else. Sometimes it arrives as peace. In this emotional drama inspired by unforgettable family stories, a mother-in-law finds herself trapped between suspicion, grief, and unanswered questions after a shocking moment changes everything she thought she knew about her family. As hidden documents, mysterious meetings, and long-buried secrets begin to surface, she slowly pieces together a puzzle that leads her toward an unexpected truth. Meanwhile, her daughter-in-law remains at the center of every clue, leaving relatives wondering, what is really happening behind closed doors? Filled with tension, loyalty, doubt, and redemption, this story explores how trust can be tested even among the people closest to us. Fans of family stories will enjoy the layered mystery, emotional discoveries, and realistic family dynamics woven throughout every scene. If you love compelling family stories with strong characters, meaningful twists, and heartfelt resolutions, these family stories deliver a memorable journey that proves the truth often arrives when it is needed most. Family. Stories like this remind us that understanding is sometimes more powerful than suspicion. Character 1. Margaret Hayes, a 69-year-old white American woman. Front-facing portrait. Silver shoulder-length hair. Kind intelligent eyes. Elegant navy blue blouse. Modest classic style. Realistic skin texture. Natural lighting. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Photorealistic. Character 2. Olivia Hayes, a 34-year-old white American woman. Front-facing portrait. Long blonde hair. Symmetrical attractive face. Confident expression. Elegant cream-colored dress. Refined modern style. Realistic skin texture. Natural lighting. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Photorealistic. 1. Cinematic family banquet hall in upscale, suburban America. Large, elegant event room with white tablecloths, crystal glasses, warm golden evening sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Margaret Hayes, a 69-year-old white American woman with silver shoulder-length hair, wearing an elegant navy blue blouse, stands face-to-face with Olivia Hayes, a 34-year-old white American woman with long blonde hair, wearing a refined cream-colored dress. Both women positioned at the center of a silent crowd of relatives. Margaret shows calm authority and quiet determination. Olivia displays controlled tension and guarded confidence. Open documents and a large envelope rest on the table between them. Family members watch with anticipation, creating a circle around the confrontation. Cinematic low-angle shot. Dramatic depth of field. Emotional family tension. Realistic facial expressions. Ultra-realistic photography. Authentic American family gathering atmosphere. Natural skin texture. Professional. Movie lighting. Highly detailed environment. No violence. No weapons. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Photorealistic Hollywood drama scene. 1-2-2. Same luxury family event venue moments later. Intense emotional atmosphere. Margaret Hayes stands beside a presentation podium, holding a thick folder of documents and evidence. Her expression is composed, intelligent, and unwavering. Olivia Hayes stands several feet away, visibly surprised with uncertainty in her eyes. Ethan and extended family members surround the scene, seated at decorated banquet tables covered with flowers and elegant dining settings. Every guest is focused on the unfolding revelation. Warm cinematic spotlight naturally falls on Margaret, making her the emotional center of the room. Olivia remains sharply visible in the foreground with a conflicted expression. Wide Hollywood-style composition showing the entire hall frozen in suspense. Realistic body language. High emotional stakes. Luxurious interior architecture. Detailed faces. Authentic American family event. Golden ambient lighting. Professional cinematic photography. Shallow depth of field mixed with environmental detail. No violence. No aggression. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Hyper-realistic family mystery drama. Premium film still quality. 1, 2, 3. Exterior of an elegant American event center at sunset. Vast orange and gold sky above landscaped pathways and mature trees. Margaret Hayes stands alone on a stone walkway, holding a letter in her hands. Her expression reflects relief, wisdom, closure, and inner peace after discovering the truth. Silver hair gently moving in the evening breeze. Navy blue blouse illuminated by warm sunset light. In the distance, Olivia Hayes stands near the glass entrance, quietly reflecting with a thoughtful expression. No hostility. No confrontation. Only emotional resolution and contemplation. Through the large windows, family members can be seen softly gathered inside the hall. Cinematic wide shot emphasizing space, atmosphere, and emotional closure. Beautiful sunset reflections. Natural lighting. Realistic skin texture. Detailed environment. Emotional. Storytelling through posture and facial expression. Photorealistic movie ending scene. Elegant American suburban setting. No violence. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Ultra-realistic cinematic masterpiece. Hollywood closing frame. 1-2.